Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 600 likes on this one. It's been a little while since we've reached 600 likes on a video, so I don't know. It might be a bit of a high goal, but I'm curious to see if we could get there. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. I usually post a 2-hour video roughly every 5 days, and I post a monthly video that is 10 plus hours long, so if that's something that you're interested in, be sure to subscribe. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. We moved into this apartment in February, just me and my daughter, Ivy. It's not much, but it's ours. 5th floor, decent view, rent just barely affordable. The building is old with creaky pipes and paper-thin walls, but it's quiet and no one bothers us. Ivy is 4. She's bright and weird in the best way. Loves bugs, talks to stuffed animals like they're old friends. Invents strange stories on the fly. I've always encouraged her imagination. Kids need that. Especially after what we've been through. At first it was just a normal play. She'd crawl on the floor with her dolls, press her ear to the wood like she was listening for something. I asked her once what she was doing and she told me, "He talks funny when he's sleepy." I didn't think much of it, thought she was mimicking a TV character or something. A few days later, while brushing her teeth, she pointed to the floor and asked if I could tell the man to stop watching her. I froze, not scared, just thrown. "What man?" I asked. She pointed to the floor again. "The one who lives under the wood." I gave her a confused smile. "Honey, there's nobody under there. We're on the 5th floor, remember?" She didn't respond. Just rinsed and spat like nothing happened. That night I checked the floor while she slept. The boards were dusty but solid. No gaps, no loose panels. Still, I knelt down and tapped a few spots. Hollow, but not unusual. Old floors always sound like that. Over the next week, Ivy started avoiding the hallway. She would step around specific boards like they were hot. She stopped sleeping in her bed and would sneak into mine without saying a word. When I asked her why, she'd just whisper, "He gets louder at night." I started keeping the TV on while she fell asleep. White noise, comfort. Still, I'd catch her glancing toward the floor in the middle of a show, like she was waiting for something. Then, 2 nights ago, I woke to a loud pop, like a board snapping under weight. I rushed to her room. She was sitting upright in bed, wide-eyed, staring at the floor. I asked what happened. She pointed to a spot near the corner of the room. One of the floorboards was slightly raised. Barely noticeable, but it hadn't been like that before. I pressed down on it. It gave a little, like something beneath had pushed upward. "Did you drop something under there?" I asked. Ivy didn't answer. She just whispered, "You touched his door." Last night I barely slept. Every creak of the building made me tense. I turned on every light, sat in the living room until morning. This morning I went to the kitchen to make coffee and found a piece of paper tucked behind the cereal box. Ivy's drawing, crayon on lined notebook paper. A stick figure girl stood in a square room. Beneath her feet, a black figure was drawn in a pit of jagged lines, reaching upward with arms too long for its body. In the corner of the drawing was a sentence written in shaky, childish letters. "He said you shouldn't have touched his door." I'm not sure if I'm more afraid that Ivy drew it, or that she didn't. This is hard to talk about. I know how it's going to sound. If I hadn't lived through it, I'd scroll past this too, but if you've got kids, especially really young ones, maybe read this before you go to bed tonight. Or don't. I wish I hadn't waited. My son Jacob is 5. Smart kid. Sweet. A little obsessed with dinosaurs and drawing like most boys his age. He's never had any health issues. Never had night terrors. Until 6 weeks ago. It started small. Stuff that's easy to shrug off. He woke me up one night around 2 a.m. just standing in the hallway staring into the dark. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "I was listening to the floor." I laughed it off. Kids say weird things. But then he started waking up with weird questions like, "Where did the basement go?" Or, "What happened to the boy who used to sleep here?" We live in an apartment. There is no basement. And Jacob's had this room since he was born. It got worse. He'd cry when I tried to tuck him in and say stuff like, "I don't want to go back in the hole," or "He's watching from the wall crack." I cut all screen time. No scary books. Asked his preschool if anything happened there. Nothing. He's the happiest kid during the day, but every night around 2 to 3 a.m., I'd catch him awake, talking to someone, whispering, always smiling. Then he stopped calling me Mom. He started calling me Elaine. That's not my name. I asked him who Elaine was, and he said, "You, before, when the house was still burning." He said it like I should know what he meant. A week later, I found his drawings. Pages of stick figures. All normal except for one. A tall, stretched out shadow with black arms that touched the ground and a wide hole in its chest. It appeared over and over, always standing beside a little boy. Jacob called it the Keeper. He said, "The Keeper lives under where the bricks were." I asked what bricks. He said, "The bricks they buried me under." That night I barely slept. I did some digging the next day. Turns out our apartment complex was built in the early 90s. Before that, it was a group foster home. Burned down in 1989. 7 children died, all under 10. One body was never recovered. His name was Eli Matthews. I found a newspaper article. There was a grainy photo. Jacob looks exactly like him. Same chin, same freckles, same scar above the eyebrow. I showed it to my mother without explaining, and she asked me when Jacob took that old-timey photo. The next night I caught him digging at the floor of his closet with a spoon. When I asked him what he was doing, he looked up and smiled. Not a 5-year-old smile. He's almost done fixing the hole. Once it's open, I have to go back. I asked who. He said, "The Keeper." He promised I'd get my real mom back. Last night I got a phone call at exactly 2:13 a.m. No caller ID, just static and breathing. Then a voice, low, cracked like it came from inside a wall. "Elaine, he was never yours." I ran to Jacob's room. He was standing in the corner facing the wall, smiling. He turned to me and said, "He found the basement." There is no basement. This morning I checked his closet again. I noticed the carpet was slightly raised in the corner. Underneath it was a wooden trapdoor. I swear wasn't there before. Update. I opened it. There's a staircase and it goes down. I'm posting this from my phone. I'm taking a flashlight. I'm going in. I don't know what else to do. If you don't hear from me again, don't let him. leave the house. In the days following marriage, there was a weird sort of hold that tradition had on us. Custom dominated sense, and culture preceded reason. One of those traditions was that the bride had to be fetched to the groom's village at midnight. Always midnight. Folks said it was to guard her modesty, to make sure no stranger saw her face before she moved into her new home. But I always figured it was a matter of fear. Superstition masquerading as ritual. No one challenged it. No one dared. That night, as with so many nights before me, I was one of the men who were called to escort the bride. I was not her brother, but I was a cousin, close enough by blood to accept the honor and heavy enough with obligation to not refuse. Two of us walked behind the bullock cart, sticks in hand, keeping watch under the moon. The cart creaked like an old bone with every turn of the wheel. The bride was concealed inside, wrapped in silence, shrouded behind folds of cloth and tradition. The village was hours away from here, and the road twisted through empty fields and dense, whispering forests. The air was chill but had a stillness that made even the insects reluctant. All that could be heard was the gentle crunch of our footsteps on the ground, the oxen's sigh, and occasionally the ghostly hoot of an owl in the distance. As we strolled past a small pond, a dark sheet of still water under the stars, I saw something scurrying around its rim. I looked into the blackness. It had looked like a fox, a thin and small one, its nose twitching as it dug in the rubbish left by travelers. Maybe it was its wild movements that caught my eye. Maybe it was the way it stared at me when it saw me looking. Half jestingly, I said, "Why look there when you can ride with us? We have plenty to fill you up for days in our village." I laughed softly to myself. My partner shot me a sidelong look but remained silent. At the time I felt strangely proud of my joke, as though I had uttered something witty into the darkness. We proceeded further, but the night wasn't forgetful. 10 minutes or so after that, I heard the faintest noise behind us, a shuffle or a dragging foot. I turned and there it was, the fox, only it wasn't quite the same. It was bigger now, its fur wet or perhaps gone in patches. It trailed behind at a distance, keeping just far enough back to be just on the edge of sight in the dark. I laughed nervously and thumped my stick on the ground. "Shoo, go eat somewhere else," I said, trying to be bolder than I felt. The creature hesitated, tilted its head, but didn't flee. My cousin turned around and saw it too. "Foxes don't follow people like that," he complained. "Maybe it's sick," I replied. "I don't believe it." I kept looking over my shoulder more than I looked where I was going. The beast trailed behind, steady and slow, as if it were somehow held to us. Each time I glanced back at it, it looked less fox. Its gait was unnatural, too smooth, too silent. Its eyes had lost that animal glint and now simply reflected nothing. No fear, no curiosity, nothing. Then came the moment that changed everything. I turned once again, and what I saw rooted me to the ground. It was not a fox. It was not even a beast. It was on 4 legs, but its body was naked, smooth and long. Holes pockmarked its skin, as if decay had taken hold years ago, but it still had a purposeful movement. It was the length of a calf, contorted and curved in shape, but appallingly alive. It looked at me as if it had heard the joke I had told and had accepted the invitation. I remained there, My heart was beating so fast that I was afraid to wake the bride. My cousin bent forward and whispered, What is that?" But I couldn't answer. I knew in my very bones that we could not bring it into the village, so I did the best I could think to do. I approached it slowly on foot, shaking with every step. I placed my stick in front of me as a sign of surrender, then went down on my knees. "Please," I whispered. "I've done something wrong. There is nothing there for you where we're going. I've made a false statement. Don't follow us, please." The creature didn't move. It stared at me, empty eyes unblinking. For a moment I was convinced it was about to pounce, but then, with a slight shift of its odd head, or perhaps a readjustment of its odd body, it wheeled westward and left. No noise, no sign, silent and away. It disappeared into the darkness, consumed by the night. I just stood there for what seemed like forever before I could walk again. My cousin and I never said a word to one another as we walked. We did not even glance to see if the beast would return. We did not care. 1 week later, word came from the west. Village after village. Sick. People dying in scores. Some said it was malaria. Others said it was a curse. I remembered the holes on that creature's skin, the way it walked, the silence it carried with it. I remembered what I had said, what I had invited. Was it me? I kept asking myself over and over. Did I unleash something? The shame clung to me like dust, heavy and smothering. I starved for days. I could not sleep without seeing its face, or what amounted to one. Each evening I caught myself gazing out to the west, half hoping to see its shape materialize on the horizon, coming back to claim the rest of what I had vowed. Years went by, and the sensation never faded. The bride and groom went on with their lives, and other people quickly forgot that evening. But I did not. I could not. Certain errors diminish with the passing of time, but some cast a shadow. I had laughed in the darkness, and something had listened, something that did not laugh. And now, even years later, I find myself wondering, was that thing the disease carrier, a ghost, a demon, or was it something created by guilt, born from a coincidence so terrible it could not be overlooked? I don't know. All I know is this: some invitations are not meant to be spoken, and if they've done so, they cannot be taken back anymore. She always questioned why I was wearing makeup. Is it for a boy? Why are you wearing it today and not yesterday? Why are you doing it differently today? Back in high school, I could never catch a break from her. She was my best friend since middle school, and there were literally zero boundaries between us in her mind. We had the same classes, sang in chorus together, and went to the same church. But even though her questions like these were irksome, it was best to not confront her head on, which I think I always knew subconsciously, even before knowing what I do now. I have a taciturn and deeply non-confrontational personality, so back then I would rather die than say the truth, which is to say I'd never admit to wanting to look attractive out loud. So I'd pretend that I did my makeup absent-mindedly just to end the conversation. We basically did the same song and dance every time I wore makeup. I found that it was just easier to lie, or, more often than not, just to not wear it. My looks and self-esteem be damned. More than anything else are the things that I remember about my early high school days. When I think back to all those drawn-out hours with her at school, Carpool, chorus events, summer camps. I remember specific things like her questions about my makeup, any changes to my hair, new clothes, etc. And not to sound like a queen bee, but it also seemed like if I bought anything new, she would too. Jewelry, keds, dresses, ringtones for my cell phone. We had plenty of laughs and good times too, but the feelings that have persisted are the ones of insecurity and exhaustion from avoiding being on her bad side. I also remember her being a really tough hang. I couldn't bring any new friends or acquaintances around. She was loud, talkative, and needlessly abrasive to new people. If you looked up RFB in a dictionary, you'd see a picture of her being around someone she didn't know already. She was also an oversharer, especially with gross body stuff, and an over-communicator. I couldn't log on to AIM without her already being there, literally at all hours of the night. She called anytime she was driving from one place to another, and I learned that it was better to always answer, even if it was terrible timing. One time, I passive-aggressively didn't answer when she called. After 5 minutes, I gave her a call back. She didn't answer, but she returned my call immediately. I didn't answer her again, and then called her right back. Guess what? She didn't answer, but again, she called me right back. We did this back and forth a couple more times. It felt obnoxious in the moment, and even more so in hindsight. I came to the conclusion that she would never answer when I called. She'd only call me. One time I literally couldn't bring myself to answer. I was in one of those moods where I couldn't stomach even a 5-minute conversation. So I texted her and said I couldn't talk and asked what was up. She never texted me back and literally didn't speak to me for an entire week. Apparently she was going through something and really needed me that day. But honestly, I don't believe that it was anything out of the ordinary. I don't remember what eventually broke the silence between us after that tiff, but I remember feeling happy that we were on speaking terms again. After less than a day, it was like it never happened. Now, to the day that changed everything. It was a normal school day in late April, definitely in that post-spring break season where the sun is shining, and it's torture to be cooped up in a classroom. Another one of her quirks is that she had to know what I scored on every test and likewise would tell me what she scored. It was a frustrating expectation of hers. She had a habit of calling herself an intellectual, without even a hint of irony, mind you. But in truth, she was very, very smart, so she usually scored higher than I did. But one time in English, I aced a test while she got something worse but respectable, like an 87. She asked what I got as soon as the teacher gave me my test back. I pretended not to hear her and put it face down on my desk while I rummaged in my backpack. In a flash, she stood up, reached across and grabbed my test before I knew what was happening. It was all so aggressive and happened so rapidly that I couldn't help but shoot her a nasty, what the hell, kind of look. I remember us having an uncomfortable beat or two of eye contact, and then her looking at my test, after which her face darkened, severely. Whether it was my test result, or my honest reaction to her invading my privacy and personal space, I had deeply offended her. What made matters worse is that everyone noticed since it was a sort of violent disruption to a quiet classroom. After that incident, again I got the silent treatment, but this stretched far more than 2 weeks. She was not speaking to me in the mornings at carpool. She skipped chorus events, and at school it was just strange. I would look in her direction and she'd pretend to not notice me, but when I wasn't looking, I could feel her watching me. It was so weird, but I was not in a hurry to mend fences with her. One day after school, I got a text from her. This was so many years and phones ago, so I don't remember specifics, but it had something to do with a school assignment. There was no apology or warmth, or even an attempt to awkwardly address the situation. The text was so random, and I felt like she was fishing for a reaction. So I didn't answer. I wanted to actually have a conversation, and if she couldn't handle that, then I was also fine just moving on. I wasn't going to let her dictate how we were going to resolve things. Later that night, she sent another message on AIM that asked if I saw her text, and also if she could come over right then. I logged off immediately so I wouldn't feel compelled to answer. It was all really weird. She wasn't at school the next day. I didn't think too much of it, except that it was refreshing to not have to ignore her for a full school day. That afternoon, one of our assistant principals showed up to my biology classroom and asked for me to accompany him to the principal's office. My principal began asking me questions about my friend and about her interest in computers, which I didn't know how to answer. I said that she was a whiz at AIM, but that's about all I knew. Turns out, my friend had made a hit list naming me directly. My principal had printed it out for me to read, and it was some of the most vulgar things I've ever heard. He explained that she tried using an offshore router in her email to the school the day before, but they were able to easily pinpoint her IP address and alert the actual authorities. From there, my recollection gets blurry, but I remember getting a police escort home from school that day with a helicopter overhead and everything. She was sent to juvenile detention, and then eventually to a girls-only mental institution in Florida for a short stint. I don't think she was ever formally convicted, but she was expelled. Her family moved that summer a few towns away and enrolled her at a private school. My principal would check in on me randomly from that point until I graduated a few years later. I think he did that because he wanted to let me know that the administration was thinking about me, but I'm sure he was also angling to see if I received any threats, which I, thankfully, never did. So many years have passed, and I honestly don't think about those days too often. They were confusing and frustrating years, and the meeting with the principal and the fallout with my friend happened in quick succession. Every now and again I'll see her on social media, and her name comes up here and there in conversations with family or old friends. I'm writing this all to give context. She just messaged me on social media, and I'm not sure what to do. I was terrified. Still am if I'm being honest. It's not every day your guitar amp gets possessed. Here's what happened. My guitar amp started picking up a random radio station. Initially it was faint, barely above a whisper. I just grumbled, then went back to practicing whatever I was working on. Probably something by Brandon Lake. The next morning, I'd completely forgotten about it. I had other problems. This was a dark period in my life. After spending my 20s touring in a Christian alt-country band, I decided to settle down and find gainful employment. Is there such a thing these days? Perhaps I'd find a partner and get married. Simple pleasures, right? Well, I did find employment. Although I wouldn't call working at an outlet store selling shoes gainful. Around that time, I'd lost interest in playing music. In fact, I'd gone a full year without touching my guitar. I was emotionally drained, having spent most of my young adult life touring crummy venues and crashing in cheap motels. To make matters worse, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a partner. This saddened me. Probably that's why I picked up the old Fender Telecaster again. Shame me if you will, but I knew if I performed at some open jams on the weekend, my chances of finding an interesting partner would greatly improve. It's worked in the past. You see, I'm socially awkward. A wee bit on the spectrum, perhaps. Picking up women was never my forte. I'd sooner sit on a frozen toilet seat than approach some good-looking stranger in a bar. Yikes. And online dating just isn't my bag. Ya dig? Tried once and failed miserably. I still prefer meeting people the old-fashioned way, in person, even though the process eludes me. When I'm performing music, however, they approach me. It's how I meet people. It's my superpower. Anyways, back to the amp. The following weekend, while I was plucking away on my electric guitar, it happened again. My amp was picking up a random radio station. Only this time, it was loud and clear. It scared the hair right off my head. What was left of it anyways. The DJ spoke in a low-pitched, sardonic voice. Something about his voice sounded off. It was too harsh, for starters. Like a chainsaw. Voices don't sound like that. Human voices, that is. His drawl was as deep as a Leonard Cohen song. A drawl that can only come from the deep south. Eastern Kentucky, perhaps, but not quite. It was unlike any voice I'd ever heard. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, in a crummy one-bedroom apartment, nowhere near the south, so you can imagine my confusion. The voice speed talked for about a minute, while I stood stupefied, scratching my head. Ultimately, I chalked it up to a faulty patch cord and kept picking away at Sturgill Simpson's version of a Nirvana song. When the DJ spoke my name, I nearly died. "Hey, Noah," the voice croaked. "You gonna learn to play that thing or what?" I dropped my guitar pick and watched it bounce underneath the bed. "Welcome to WDVL 666 on your earthly dial." The voice went on as if nothing was out of the ordinary, as if he hadn't just spoken my name. "Hail Satan, he's the truth, the light, and the darkness." The voice rumbled on and on, speaking so fast he barely had time to breathe. Meanwhile, I was trembling, my bladder threatening to burst. That the DJ knew my name troubled me most. I wondered what else he knew. Did he know my faith was weakening, or that I'm a sinner? With a flick of the wrist, I turned off the amplifier. His grim voice died an awful death. I gulped. My right leg was twitching 1,000,000 miles per hour. What's going on? Was something wrong with me? Clearly there was. But what? I wasn't taking drugs. I rarely drank alcohol, nor was I on any meds. I wasn't a weirdo. The people at work seemed to like me, and I wasn't living in some random haunted house. This made 0 sense. Needless to say, I avoided the amplifier, choosing instead to practice on my acoustic guitar. Problem was, I could barely strum the damn thing. My hands were so shaky. That night, sleep was futile. My mind was racing, so instead of tossing and turning, I did some research and discovered that the problem was, in fact, my faulty patch cord. Just as suspected. The next day, after work, I went to a local guitar store and purchased a new one. Paid a hefty price, but I wanted the very best. Guitar stuff isn't cheap, let me tell you. When I returned home, the guitar amp seemed larger than life, lurking joylessly in the corner of my bedroom, daring me to plug it in. Every time I'd pick up my electric guitar, ready to blast out some chords, my anxiety skyrocketed, and I'd put it down. My nerves were shot. I started talking to myself. Not a good sign. I had to do something. This was getting ridiculous. So, at long last, I plugged the shiny new cable into my amp, a Fender 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb, for all you gearheads, and started rocking out. Nothing. No devilish DJ, no random radio station, just pure, angelic Fender tone. Phew. Relieved, I set about working on some Johnny Cash songs. Who doesn't like the Man in Black? While I was belting out Ring of Fire, giving it all I had, the unthinkable happened. The dreadful DJ returned. Hell yes, my son. You will, in fact, burn in a ring of fire. Lord below, Satan is the way, the truth, and the answer. Give in to him, and he shall fulfill your deepest, darkest desires. I froze. My tongue felt like a sponge. My hands as big as baseball gloves. My blood turned to ice. Something about the voice paralyzed me. It was like he was in my room, delivering his diabolical sermon directly to me. That's right, Noah, he sneered. Give in to Satan, the Lord of Death, and he shall deliver salvation. You want a partner? A luscious, beautiful blonde? I'll bet you do. Or how about a busty brunette? Yes, sir. A gal that loves her country music. I unplugged the cord, hoping that would stop him. It didn't. Nah, he continued louder than before. What you really need, Noah, my hapless human friend, is a fiery redhead. Lord below, one that'll suck the paint off your porch, if you know what I mean. I don't care to intrude, Noah, but you're looking awfully thin these days. I do reckon. And I turned off the amp. It crackled and popped, then went silent. My beating heart, which was louder than a bass drum at a rock concert, filled the room. Tears threatened my eyelids. I'd always loved that amp, had it for years. Suddenly I was too afraid to even look at it, let alone touch it. What a dilemma. Smartly I put the guitar back in its case and shoved the case in the closet. Then I wept. That night the DJ visited my dreams. I can't recall exactly what he said, but I woke up in a pool of sweaty sheets. Worse, my fingertips were encrusted with blood, and I was balding. My once golden hair was sprinkled across my moist pillow, like evidence. I knew I needed help, but there was no one to turn to. Having spent 10 years on the road, my only friends were my bandmates. And let's just say we didn't end our partnership amicably. Spending that much time with anyone, even your closest friends, can cause serious friction, even in the best of times. And I'm not close with my family. They never approved my musician lifestyle. I have many acquaintances, but only one true friend, Peter, and he's going through his own version of hell, a nasty divorce. So I didn't reach out. After my morning shower, I put on a fresh pair of Levi's and a plaid sweater. As I was leaving the bedroom, my amp started hissing. The red power light was flickering. When it spoke, I nearly had a heart attack. "Plug me in," the DJ said in a croaky voice. "You're not scared, are you?" The rational part of my mind insisted that nothing was wrong, that this was merely my overzealous imagination. Had to be, right? But that didn't explain the voice. Amps don't speak, especially when they're unplugged. I shoved the amp in the closet next to the guitar. For the remainder of the week, I avoided the electric guitar and returned to my trusty old acoustic, a Gibson J100. Life seemed to settle. The following weekend, longing to find myself a partner, I decided to hit up a local jam session. It had been over a year since I'd last performed. I needed this. Problem was, most jam sessions provided inadequate amplifiers, and tone is king. It's a guitarist thing. So despite my trepidation, I loaded my amp, guitar, and a tube screamer overdrive pedal into the van and drove downtown. The house band was fairly decent, weekend warriors at best, but nice enough fellas. That they knew who I was certainly boosted my confidence. I'd only done backing vocals in my previous band. Now I was to sing lead. Confidence was crucial. When they called me up, We blasted through a Georgia Satellites classic, followed by Tennessee Whiskey, always a crowd favorite. Although it was a meager-sized audience, I had them in the palm of my sweaty hands. My voice felt strong, and my amp sounded superb. Halfway through Tennessee Whiskey, I noticed a redhead wearing a tight Zeppelin t-shirt, giving me dirty eyeballs. She couldn't keep her gorgeous green eyes off me. I felt invincible, just like old times. With the 2 songs completed, the small but mighty crowd demanded an encore. I busted into Ring of Fire, and all hell broke loose. The drummer kicked off a steady train groove. The bass player locked in nicely. There was a keyboard player on stage providing the much-needed harmony. I played the trumpet bit on the guitar. We nailed the intro. Love, I sang in a throaty baritone, is a burnin' thing. The redhead started dancing, and it makes a fiery ring. As I leaned into the mic, eager to deliver the next line, I got zapped, electrocuted. I fell with a thud, cracking my head on the side of the stage. The mic stand went flying and slammed the keyboard player in the skull. He went down, too. Amidst the chaos, my amp started speaking. This is WDVL 666 on your earthly dial. Everybody stared, stupefied, as I lay sprawled across the stage, twitching. The band leader approached me cautiously. You all right, son? I tried speaking, but my lips felt like 2 balloons. Graciously, he helped me up. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed the redhead walking out of the bar, shaking her head. The remaining patrons chuckled, then returned to their drinks. With a troubled mind and scorched lips, I gathered my gear in disgrace. You're pitiful, Noah, the DJ pestered. All hail Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, the Evil One, Lord of the Flies. The hair on my arm stood tall. My mouth was as dry as a musician's sense of humor. I studied the bar room. Was anyone else hearing this? Apparently not. Or if they did, they chose to ignore it. I drove home highly agitated. What the hell's wrong with my damned amplifier? I pouted. And why me? What did I do to deserve this? Not only was I miserable, I was petrified. I needed to get to the bottom of it, and fast, so I contacted a local luthier, a guitar repair person, for you non-musicians. When I told Steve, not his real name, what was happening, he turned ghost white. Heard of this happening once before. Steve said in a nasally voice. He ran a large hand through his thinning gray hair and paused. Paul Marino, he said thoughtfully, eyes cast afar. Poor old Paul is still in the mental hospital, or whatever it's called these days. Not allowed visitors, last I heard. Steve looked at my amp with suspicion, then smiled awkwardly. I was as tense as a $2 steak. Having just turned 31, I knew I was too young for a midlife crisis, but that's how it felt. And I was lonely. Playing guitar was my only outlet. I needed it, even if only on the weekends. Tell you what, Steve said, inspecting the amp. I'm sure it's nothing. Probably your patch cord. You have your cables on you? I did. Good, he said. Leave 'em with me. I'll have a look. Come back next week. I sighed. He turned the amp on and, using my cables, plugged a guitar into it. No radio station, no disreputable DJ. He strummed a G chord. It sounded as sweet as roses. Looks fine. Sounds good. Steve shrugged. It's probably nothing but strange karma. He winked. We shook hands, then I left. It was a rough week. I barely could concentrate at work, and I no longer felt comfortable at home. I slept on the couch, avoiding my bedroom like the plague. The following week, when I hadn't heard back from Steve, I stopped by his shop after work. The lights were off. The parking lot was deserted. I called him, and it went straight to his voicemail, which was full. An icy chill climbed up my spine. Steve worked late hours. He should be open. The following Friday, there was still no word from Steve. My anxiety skyrocketed. I could only imagine what my dreaded amp was doing, or saying to him. My life was in turmoil. I'd lost weight, and to my chagrin, I'd gone completely bald, seemingly overnight. None of that mattered. What mattered was that people were posting about Steve on social media, asking for information. Apparently he failed to show up for a band rehearsal, and he missed an important gig. His family and friends were worried sick. By now, I was completely freaked out. The cursed amp. What the devil was going on? A question came, one I could do without. What would the deranged DJ do next? My mind jumped to many conclusions, each more terrifying than the last. Was the devil out for revenge? Was he punishing me for quitting my band? He probably hates Christian country bands. Maybe I should play heavy metal. Surely the devil loves metal. Or perhaps I should pack up and move to Canada. He'd never find me up there. Too damn cold. I stayed put. My rational mind was having none of this. Surely this is a case of bad luck. Or as Steve put it, strange karma. Another week went by and still no news of Steve. It was like he'd vanished. Ultimately, I was forced to purchase a new guitar amp. Truth be told, I was kinda excited. Yeah, I was saddened about Steve. He'd helped me a lot back in the day, working on my road-worn gear, but perhaps a new amp was all that was required. Out with the old, in with the new, as they say. Don't judge. Once a musician, always a musician. I had to do something. Besides, it's not like I murdered Steve. All I did was bring him a glitchy amp. Repairing amps was his job, for Christ's sake. Thus, I bought a brand new Vox AC30, a classic. When I plugged it in, it sounded wicked good. No devil, no radio station, just a smooth, velvety tone. The amp soared. I cranked it to 11 and waited all weekend. It was a blast, although I'm sure the neighbors would disagree. Relieved yet anxious, I needed redemption. It was time. I had to return to the local jam session. Perhaps there was still a chance of impressing the redhead. Needing new material, I decided to take a stab at something more challenging. A popular Charlie Daniels song. Not an easy feat, let me tell ya. Playing the fiddle parts on guitar would require a heck of a lot of practice and dexterity. But the devil's in the details, as they say, so I woodshedded all week. I was extremely nervous. Bizarre amps, missing luthiers, electrical shocks. If only I had something to soothe my worried mind. A fiery redhead, perhaps. Despite my trepidation, I practiced the Charlie Daniels song as though my life depended on it, and perhaps it did. Another week passed, still no Steve. Surely an omen. I was coming unglued, but sitting around feeling sorry for myself wasn't helping. So I returned to the local jam session, toting my brand new Vox AC30. The place was packed. The fiery redhead was there, sipping cocktails in the corner with her friends. The host looked at me peculiarly, but smiled nonetheless. I was terribly nervous about performing the Charlie Daniels song. What if the house band couldn't handle such a challenging piece? Maybe I should reconsider and choose a simpler song. When I was called up to perform, a few patrons giggled, including the redhead. Despite my shoddy nerves, I played exceptionally well. My guitar soared like an eagle. The Vox delivered what it promised, killer tone. The band was hot. The audience was receptive. After blazing through a Jimmy Reed song, Big Boss Man, I started to relax. Things were actually going my way. It was time to play the Charlie Daniels song. The drummer, a middle-aged Mexican man with a cop mustache and a hefty beer gut, looked uneasy. Nonetheless, he counted off. The devil went down to Georgia, and away we went. You gonna play that thing, boy, or stand there looking stupid? The DJ. His menacing voice soared through the amp speaker, clear as a bell. Because I'm in the mood for some fiddlin', Lord below, yes sir I am. His voice was as meaty as a porterhouse. Fear paralyzed me. My shaky hands could barely hold the guitar pick. I'd forgotten the words. I didn't know what to do. Fortunately, singing wasn't required. Apparently Satan knew all the words. Well, the devil went down to Georgia, he sang. He was looking for a soul to steal. He was in a bind 'cause he was way behind. And he was willing to make a deal when he came across this young man. I fainted. When I came to, the bar room had cleared out. The bartender glared at me with contempt. I felt like an imbecile, a total loser. I left immediately. In the confusion, I'd forgotten the amp. I considered returning for it, but was too embarrassed. So I stayed at home and wallowed in self-pity. I've thought long and hard about the decision. Maybe I should have gone back for it. Maybe not. Hard to say. Because what happened next still haunts my dreams. Later that night, in a burning ring of fire, the bar was set ablaze. Foul play is suspected. And still, no word from Steve. You ever notice something in your house that wasn't? A corner that feels colder, a shadow that bends wrong, maybe a door you swear didn't used to be there. Mine appeared on a Tuesday. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 office, always been that way. I work from home, no pets, no guests, just me. But when I walked past the hallway that afternoon, there it was. A door on the left wall. Same color, same handle. Perfectly normal. Only problem? That wall's never had a door. I stood frozen, just stared. I even took out my phone to check old pictures. Walls empty in every single one. So obviously I did the stupidest thing. I opened it. It was a room, small, empty, dustless, windowless. The air was warm, still. The floorboards were the same as the rest of the apartment, but newer, like freshly installed. The ceiling light flicked on automatically, humming softly. I stepped inside just for a second. When I stepped out again, it was night. I checked my phone. 3:42 a.m. I'd lost over 10 hours. I tried to convince myself I fell asleep, blacked out, whatever. But the next morning the room was still there, and something was in it. A chair. Not like one I own. This one was old, Victorian maybe. Ornate carvings, crimson velvet, worn down to threads and spots. And on the chair, a single Polaroid. It was of me standing in the room, but I never took that photo. I slammed the door shut, locked it, pushed a bookshelf in front of it. I didn't sleep. The next morning I pushed the shelf aside. The room had changed. Now there were 3 Polaroids. Me sitting, me looking up in confusion, and the third, me screaming. Over the next week the room grew, slowly by inches. A side table one day, a coat rack the next. Every day something was different. The light bulb began to flicker. The air smelled like rotting wood. The photos multiplied, but I never went in again. I started hearing things at night, shuffling, a soft, dragging noise, like something pacing in a circle. One night I heard humming, a lullaby I couldn't place. And then the photos started appearing outside the room, in my fridge, my coat pocket, my shoe. One was pinned to my pillow. Me, sleeping, shot from above. I called my landlord. I asked about previous tenants. He hesitated before saying, "You're in 3B, right?" "Yeah." He paused again. "There is no 3B. I thought he was messing with me, until I went outside. The building has no third floor. I live on the second floor, and the apartment above me is gone. It's just roof. I ran back inside. My hole was longer than I remembered. The door to the room was now the only door. My bedroom? Gone. Office? Gone. Just the door, and the chair, and the photos. Hundreds now. Thousands, maybe. Piled on the floor, pinned to the walls, floating in the air. All of me. Dozens of angles. All expressions. Some I don't remember making. Some I know I never made. Some photos are of me sleeping in places I've never been. One shows me with my eyes stitched shut. One shows me hanging from the ceiling. One shows me holding a camera, smiling. And now there's a mirror. It wasn't there before. And in that mirror, I just saw myself stand up from the chair. But I haven't moved. I don't think I ever left the room. I think it's been watching me pretend to. I think it's learning. I think it's almost ready to take my place. So if you ever notice a new door in your house, don't open it. Please. Don't let it out. I want to tell you a story. I really don't care if you believe me. I know that what I'm about to say might sound frightening, but please, don't be frightened. Something wonderful has happened to me, and if you're reading this, I think it could happen to you too. Let me tell you about a miracle. It was about a month ago that my grandfather passed on due to complications from his stroke late last year. He and I were very close, and after his stroke, I had taken care of my grandmother and him the best I could while still making my way through university. The day of the funeral service, it rained like hell. The ground of the tiny cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe turned to mush underfoot, and a few unfortunate folks got mud all over their funeral blacks. The service had been incredibly hard for me, and because I had a lot of difficulty crying around my family and friends, I decided to stay back from the burial service so I could get a couple minutes to honestly grieve. That's when I saw him. The cemetery's caretaker stood out in the pouring rain looking underdressed and soaked to the bone. He stood a respectful distance away from the service, clearly not wanting attention, but I could tell he was shivering, so I walked over with my black umbrella to give him some relief. When I got closer, the first thing I noticed was that he was young. Under his thick, blonde beard, he couldn't have been more than a year or two older than me. The second thing I noticed was an odor that hung around him, thick and cool. It wasn't a terrible smell, more that he smelled like wet, black earth, even more so than the whole world seemed to smell of it in the rain, and a sort of cinnamony scent I couldn't quite place. "That's very kind of you, sir," he said in a surprisingly soft voice. "It's just that you looked cold," I stammered out, slightly off balance from the age, the smell, and now the voice. The caretaker gestured out to the mass of black umbrellas and solemn faces. "Who was he to you?" he asked in that soft, almost cautious voice. "My grandfather. I loved him dearly," I said, the second half of the sentence falling lame even to my own ears. "You and all those people out there," he gestured with a long-nailed hand out to my friends and family. "I've worked this plot for a long time, seen all sorts go into the earth. You can always tell when it's a well-loved one. Something in the faces of the mourners. I can't quite explain, but it's there." He picked each word carefully, like an artist selecting just the right brush. As he spoke, I caught a whiff of his breath, and the smell that hung around him hit me even harder, this time less pleasant, and with an underlying rank sweetness. "How long have you worked here?" I inquired, eager to change the subject as my roiling emotions threatened to bubble over again. "A good long while now. I don't bother keeping track. The work's rewarding, and this is a good place. A calm and quiet place." His face spoke of a life that hadn't always been full of calm and quiet places. I couldn't disagree with him, though. Despite the rain, or maybe even because of the cemetery had almost an ethereal stillness, and looking over the well-cleaned headstones, I could see how this place could be someone's haven, if not mine. We made a sort of gentle conversation that slowly spun out into silence. Then we stood for a while, listening to the rain patter on the fabric of the umbrella we shared, and watching the service from afar. It wasn't until just before I was about to excuse myself to return to the last minute of the service that he spoke again. "I don't think most people would have shared their umbrella," he mused without looking away from the mourners and meeting my eyes. "Why's that?" I asked, startled out of my thoughts. "They're uncomfortable with people like me, people who are proximate to death and decay. Thank you for being different, and thank you for the conversation. I think it's time you get back to your grandfather. They're about to begin the lowering." He offered one of his long-nailed hands. I took it with only the slightest hesitation. His grip was strong, painfully so. As he squeezed my hand, he leaned in, breath stinking of the grave, he said, "Good deeds are rewarded, my friend. Run along now." The biting grip disappeared as quick as it came on, and I did my best to politely excuse myself without appearing shaken. I didn't notice until later, but those long, snaggled fingernails had bitten into the meat of my right hand in 2 places, forming a shallow V-shaped cut. There was a small reception after at my grandparents' house. We told stories about my grandfather, some of which I had never heard until then. It felt like once the ritual of viewing and funeral and burial were complete, my grandfather had somehow become a real person again, if that makes any sense. I felt closer to him than I had when I was helping to carry the casket. The house seemed to hold something of his presence that his cold body couldn't match. I never expected a funeral to have snacks, but the reception had tons of food, none of which I had much of an appetite for. Eventually, I excused myself. I was exhausted and I had to get ready for school the next day. As I left, my grandmother insisted I take some of my grandfather's brandy with me. She said she wouldn't drink it anyway, and that brandy is good for the constitution. When I asked her why that was important, she said with simple finality, "You just look a bit pale, that's all." That night, I dreamed of the cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe. I dreamed of the silent headstones at night, how the place would look lit only by the street lights spilling over the high wall that surrounded it. I dreamed that I was late to my grandfather's funeral, that I was dressed in the blacks and my dress shoes were getting stuck in the sucking, grasping mud, and when I finally made it to the grave, everybody was long gone. I had something that I meant to give my grandfather before he was buried, a little silver fork. and so I began to dig with my hands into the filled grave so that I could give him this one last thing, and he could give me something that I wanted in return. As I dug into the soaked earth, the smell of the grave filled my nose and my stomach bubbled and stirred uncomfortably. I excavated the way down, silver fork held in my teeth before my nails scratched on the lid of the coffin. Suddenly the flash of lamplight came over me and I woke up in a feverish sweat, my mouth full of a gungy, unclean, sick taste. My bones ached, and I knew immediately that I would not be making it to class today. I lay a while in my sticky, damp sheets. The dream was still pressed into the forefront of my consciousness. The pure illogic of it bemused me. My fevered brain raked over the details of the dream. Only as I pulled my mind away from the empty, sodden cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe, did I realize just how hungry I was. In all the events of yesterday, I had completely forgotten to eat. I hadn't had any appetite at the reception, and once I had gone, I had been too preoccupied by my grief and preparations for school. When I awoke, fevered as I was starving. I peeled myself out of my sheets and walked tenderly through my apartment. I filled a glass with water and sucked it down to try to soothe my aching head. It did no good. When I opened my refrigerator, a pungent cacophony of odors hit me in waves. I slammed the fridge door shut before the smell made me sick. Has something gone off in there? I wondered to myself. The worst part was that the horrible smell hadn't delayed my hunger for more than a few seconds. I grabbed a piece of bread and started chewing it, but the texture suddenly felt all wrong, and I hadn't gotten more than bite down when I had to run to my sink to retch. Bent over the sink, quivering with tremors and smelling my own thin vomit, I realized that maybe the best thing I could do for myself was go back to bed. After I sent off a few short emails to my professors explaining that I was ill, I decided I would shower off the tacky sweat residue that clung to my skin. As I reached for my soap in the shower, I noticed something strange on my hand. At first I thought it was an ink stain, but when I inspected the V-shaped mark on the bottom of my right hand, I realized that two small cuts the caretaker's fingernails had made had scabbed over completely black. I was immediately worried that the cut had become infected or something, but there was no inflammation, and when I prodded it gently, it didn't sting any more than your typical scab. After I finished my shower, I opted to dab some polysporin on and around it and go back to my bed. I took a long while getting back to sleep between the fever and the stomach cramping hunger, but when I did, my dreams were strange again. I dreamed of family dinners and the cemetery. I dreamed of the caretaker with his shovel. I dreamed of him filling graves and emptying them. I dreamed about the sound a shovel makes when it hits the roof of a casket, like the sound of a pirate striking buried treasure. I dreamed of smelling that damp dirt and cinnamon smell, and when I woke late in the evening, my fever had grown far worse and my mouth was watering. I was getting worse. I was a pale and shaking mess, completely unable to keep a bite of solid food down. When I tried a sip of my grandfather's brandy, I nearly spat it out. A rancid flavor had surpassed even the burn of alcohol in it. I resolved to drink only water until this flu or fever had passed, and I shivered out the rest of the evening on my couch trying to distract myself from the vicious combination of malaise and hunger. I dazed intermittently but always started awake from strange dreams full of grave dirt. 48 hours after my grandfather's funeral, I decided I was going to go to the emergency room. The fever was bad. The hunger was worse. I had wondered if I was well enough to drive, but ultimately decided that if this was contagious, it would be best for everyone if I tried to avoid exposing anyone. By the time I had walked out to my car, My heart was racing with effort, and a cloud of lightheadedness hung over me. I sat in my car for a full 8 minutes before I felt clear-headed enough to start it. Even as I started to drive, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake in trying to drive. My attention kept wandering, and I would lose seconds at a time, realizing I had run a yellow light or missed a turn. My eyes kept straying to brightly lit fast food signs, but I knew as soon as the greasy paper bag was passed over to me, I wouldn't be able to take a single bite. I rolled down my window to get some cool air on my face. That's when I realized where I was. The smell washed over me, and I felt my stomach growl maddeningly. It took a moment to identify. It was rich and cool, a simultaneously wet and dry odor. It was herby with an earthy note and the slightest hint of fruitiness. I had visions of sweet, cool fruits being pulled from rich, damp earth. My focus drifted in the tantalizing presence of this smell until the squawk of a car horn behind me snapped me out of my daze. The light at the intersection of Elk and Simons had changed to green, and I had been idling in front of it for who knows how long. I goosed the gas pedal, eyes scanning for the source of the delicious smell when I saw it. The next intersection was Elk and Monroe. The cemetery gate on the corner stood wide open, flanked by stone angels, and as I drove toward it, the sensations of smell and hunger threatened to overwhelm me, matched only by my internal horror. How could it be? How could it smell so right? There was nothing for me there, only the headstones, the dirt, and deep within the earth, gently moldering, fermenting, the many corpses with their pale flesh. I pulled away from the thought like it was a fat black spider discovered walking over my pillow. It was the fever. It's making me delirious, I reasoned to myself. I immediately turned off the street that led to the cemetery gates and, in a daze, drove halfway home before I remembered I had planned to go to the hospital. I was so desperate to get distance away from those gates and that horrid, wonderful smell that I couldn't even bring myself to turn back. Fatigue was washing over me in dark waves, and if not for the bone-deep horror that gripped me, I might have fallen asleep at the wheel. When I got back to my apartment, I pulled into my stall at a steep angle and stumbled to the elevator, resting my burning head against the cool metal of the elevator door frame as I waited for its arrival. I'll call 911 tomorrow if I'm not better, I bargained with myself. When I got into my apartment, fever had turned to chills and I hid under the sheets, body quaking and mind reeling. Even as I lay there, horror mingled with wanting into a primordial stew of feeling. Red and black fantasies played at the edge of my brain before swallowing me whole as I drifted off to uneasy sleep. In those dreams, I was a farmer in a field of dark soil and pale stones. I moved confidently with hoe and shovel, digging and planting deep within the earth. I pulled a strange and lovely crop from the ground and ate it under the stars. I was content. I basked in the night's breeze and drew in the odor of the land and my harvest moldering below its surface, and I was so at peace. But it was only a dream. I awoke. The fever had broken. The hunger had grown. When my eyes snapped open in the night-black room, I knew where my medicine was. The world had shrunk into a single point of rough need, and I rose from the chill sheets with a blank-minded purpose. Time slipped. I was in the car. The blue dashboard clock read 2:55. I watched the street lamps float past my car, and I rolled down my windows. I breathed deeply of the night air, and I caught the faintest hint of it in the wind. Time slipped. The car had stopped. I had pulled into the parking lot. Behind me, the intersection lights cast a pale green hue over the scene. The smell was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The stone angels seemed to beckon me in with outstretched hands. The gate was open even though the sign said it was closed. I took the first step on the gravel path. Time slipped. I was on my knees, a headstone out in front of me. I must have looked from afar like some midnight mourner, but I hadn't even read the name. I stared down into the dirt and saw I had already begun ripping up the sod, revealing the pregnant soil beneath. Was there one last ounce of hesitation in me? No, I don't think there was. I could smell her waiting for me down there, 6 feet of earth, and it still filled my nose like honey. I began to dig with my hands, desperately scrabbling at the earth, pull out great hunks of black earth, dirt forcing itself under my nails, small rocks cutting my palms. I didn't care. I began to weep as I realized I couldn't possibly do this without a shovel or some tool. That's when the light washed over me and my heart froze. It was him. The caretaker stood with an ancient hurricane lantern in hand, its light casting stark shadows over his face. In this light he looked far older than I remembered. I had frozen, dirt in both hands at the sight of him. I opened my mouth to say something, and all that came out were thick rivulets of drool. My mind raced. The smell drove me to dig. My brain drove me to run. I had almost decided on trying to bludgeon the caretaker and make a run for it when he spoke in that soft voice. "You poor boy, you must be starving." His eyes were solemn as he looked at me. Could it have been empathy? I can explain," I started, no idea what I was going to say, overwhelmed completely. "You don't have to. Just come with me. Let's set you right," he said. There was perhaps the faintest hint of a smile on his face then. Perhaps it was just a trick of the guttering lamplight. I let the dirt fall from my blackened hands and rose from my knee-deep hole in the earth. "What's happening to me?" I asked. The shame ran back into me like a flood, and I began to blubber again, spit and snot mingling around my mouth. There, my boy." The caretaker closed the distance between us and held me in his arms for a minute before he looked me in the eyes with utter seriousness. "Something wonderful, I promise. You'll be feeling right as rain if you just walk with me now. You've come a very long way, but you only have a few more steps." He began to lead me gently down the path. Gravel crunched underfoot and was the only sound in the silence of the cemetery. I saw that we were coming to the caretaker's workshop. It was a small white building, almost a church in miniature. From within, unsteady candlelight burned. We entered to the smell of motor oil and sawdust, and above it all, the heavenly odor of the rotted dead. When we came to the workshop's back room, the table was already set. Fine china and small silver forks and wicked sharp knives, set for 2. The centerpiece of the wide table was a long oak coffin, half rotted away. Candles had been placed at the corners of the coffin, and the caretaker bade me sit at one of the set places. Reaching into his coat pocket, he brought out a crowded keychain and carefully selected one. He slid it into the lock, and as I heard the click of it coming open, it was all I could do not to leap from my chair and push him aside as the smell of tantalizing rot seemed to double in the room. He spoke some words then. Some I understood and some that I did not. It was a benediction of sorts, a thanksgiving. "Blessed is the carrion, and blessed is he who tasteth the graveyard's fruit. We thank the ground for yielding her gifts to us. We thank the stars for sheltering us. We thank the empty vessel for remembering life, that it may be passed to us. Blessed are we by dark earth and black heavens, that we shall feast tonight." He spoke it with whispered ritual cadence. Then the small silver knife was in his hands and he was cutting. I watched as he deftly split rotted flesh from the corpse of a woman. The meat was dry in places, wet in others. It was speckled with pale purples and reds. He started with the cheek. He separated it with a few quick strokes, revealing pale jaw and teeth underneath, and then he set it on my plate. Take, eat, live. The 3 words were in the same ritual cadence, and as soon as he spoke, I descended on the meat with the desperation of a drowning man. It was like nothing I had ever tasted. Black, greasy, mealy, and yet sweeter than honeydew. More intoxicating than wine. It satisfied the indescribable need that bound itself in tight coils throughout my body. It was pure relief. The caretaker placed slice after slice of the prime cuts on my plate, and my aching, screaming hunger was finally answered. When I had eaten my fill, the caretaker set a few pieces on his own plate, and then closed and locked the coffin lid. As I sat in a warm haze of emotion and satiation, he broke the silence. He spoke to me of many things that long and deep night. I will not tell you most of it. He spoke to me of dark earth, old countries, and ancient laws. He told me of his life long and sweet, how he had worked plots like these since he was an apprentice under a master far older than he was even now. That night he showed me the grandness of what I had become, the beauty and the comfort of it. He offered me a job. He offered me a life. When I asked him why choose me, his answer was simple. When we met, I told you that good deeds should be rewarded, yes? I have no greater gift for you than this. He gestured at the dining ware and the candles burning low. I am in need of an apprentice besides. I chose you because nobody had shared an umbrella with me in my long years of this work. Few have ever shared more than a couple terse words with me. I scrub the headstones clean, keep the plots free of weeds. In my work I have done nothing but bring closure and comfort, and I am made a pariah for it. I have never done harm to the living, have never taken anything that wasn't willingly surrendered to the earth. I have lived a graceful but lonely life since I came to this country, and I want to share the goodness of it with somebody. It seemed right that it was you. It did seem right. I've been working at the cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe for 3 months now. I've dropped out of university. I'm just too busy. The hours are good. The company is excellent. 6 days a week in the shade of the cemetery, where the air is sweet and cool. Looking back, I do not know what I was afraid of. The illness is already a distant memory, and the reward was more than enough. As for the appetites, the caretaker is right. We don't take anything that wasn't given to our cemetery. We serve in the moment of people's mourning, and are paid our wages under the sheltering night sky. The caretaker has been very pleased with my work. Even with the 2 of us, we're just so busy. I have no idea how he managed it alone for so long. The dead keep coming in the gates, carried on the shoulders of their loved ones, and we plant them deep in our soil to ripen. I think he'll be hiring again soon. We just need to find the right fit. Stop by someday if you're in the area. We're on the corner of Elk and Monroe. We'd love to say hello and shake your hand. Hello, everyone. Never thought I would do this, but I need to talk. I need someone to know what I know, even if they won't believe me. I'm a normal guy just like everyone else. My life is very ordinary. Work, then home, maybe a bit too much solitude. The only thing that gives me a sense of comfort or escape from this monotony is the sky. Ever since I was a child, I've loved looking at the stars. It's a strange feeling. looking at things millions of light years away, things our ancestors saw, and perhaps generations long after us will see. It makes you feel incredibly small, but also part of something immensely larger. About a year ago, I decided to take this interest to another level. I saved up and bought a telescope. Not exactly professional grade, but a decent one. It magnifies the view and lets me see more details on the moon, nearby planets, and sometimes distant star clusters, or faint nebulae if the sky is clear. Most nights I go up to our building's rooftop, as far away from the street noise and city lights as I can manage. I sit there for hours in the quiet of the night, the sound of the cool breeze, just focused on the telescope's eyepiece. The whole world disappears, leaves only me and the tiny point of light I'm observing. Many nights passed in the same routine. I'd align the telescope to a specific region of the sky and just contemplate. Sometimes I'd look at Jupiter and its faint rings, other times at Mars with its distinct red hue, and often I'd just get lost in the endless sea of stars. I used to feel a strange peace, a peace I couldn't find anywhere else. Until one night, about 2 months ago. That night changed everything. I was on the rooftop as usual. The weather was nice, the sky relatively clear. I had an eyepiece attached that gave me a slightly wider field of view, wanting to scan an area dense with stars. As I slowly moved the telescope, I noticed something odd. A point of light, like an ordinary star, but it was stationary. At first I thought maybe my hand had shaken, or perhaps it was just a very distant aircraft. I focused harder. No, not an airplane. Airplanes follow straight or gently curved paths, and they have blinking lights. This was a steady point of light, just like a star, but it was moving. And it wasn't moving like the satellites we sometimes see crossing the sky at a constant speed in a straight line. No, this thing was moving in a way that was impossible. It was making sharp, acute angles, stopping abruptly, then shooting off in another direction at high speed, only to slow again and trace something like a strange geometric shape. Initially, I thought I might be hallucinating. Maybe my eyes were strained from focusing too long. I pulled my eye away from the eyepiece, looked up at the sky directly. Of course, I saw nothing but the familiar fixed stars. I returned to the telescope, aimed it at the same region. There it was. Still there, still moving in that same crazy manner. My heart started beating faster. What was this? A spy satellite? But what kind of satellite performs these kinds of aerobatics? A drone? What drone could reach that altitude and appear like a star? My mind raced, searching for any logical explanation, anything to hold on to. I found nothing. I kept tracking it with my eye in the telescope for about an hour. It was tracing bizarre shapes in a small patch of the sky, complex patterns, like intersecting lines, curves, and sharp angles. Then suddenly it would vanish, or move so fast I'd lose it. I came down from the rooftop feeling a mixture of shock, anxiety, and intense curiosity. I didn't know what I had just seen. I spent that whole night thinking, could it be a rare optical phenomena, a specific light reflection, a problem with the telescope itself? But the telescope worked perfectly fine with all the other stars and planets. And this phenomena was very specific, localized to that single point. The next day, I went up to the rooftop a bit earlier, before the time I'd seen the phenomena. I was tense, expectant, same area of the sky, same telescope settings. And indeed, at roughly the same time it appeared again. The same point of light, the same impossible movements. This time I was more focused. I tried to follow its path meticulously. It was tracing the exact same shapes I had seen the night before. Not similar shapes, no, precisely the same ones. The same angles, the same pauses, the same speeds. This is where it went beyond coincidence or natural phenomena, or even a conventional satellite, something tracing the same complex pattern every night, in the same spot, at the same time. This wasn't natural. This was intentional. A faint sense of dread started creeping into me. The idea of aliens or UFOs had always been just science fiction and movies to me. I never seriously considered it, but what I was seeing had no earthly explanation I could logically arrive at. If it wasn't aliens in a craft, then what? The third night, I went up armed with a notebook and pen. I started observing the point as it moved, trying my best to sketch the path it was taking. It was incredibly difficult. The movement was fast, the shapes complex, and my hand wasn't steady enough. But I was determined. I drew jagged lines, dots, angles, trying to capture any part of the pattern. Every night I went up and drew. Every night, the same movements repeated with the same meticulous precision. I began comparing the drawings from different nights. The same sequence, the same strange geometric figures. It wasn't just movement anymore. It felt more like a passage being written across the sky. But a message from whom, and why, and what did it mean? The first week passed like this. I became obsessed. My work started to suffer. My sleep dwindled. During the day, I'd think about what I saw at night, and at night, I was perched on the rooftop, fixated on that moving point of light. I started feeling utterly alone in the world, holding a secret nobody knew, and nobody would likely believe if I told them. I considered telling a friend once. We were sitting in a cafe, and I was very hesitant. Finally, I vaguely hinted that I was seeing strange things in the sky with my telescope. He looked at me and said, "Man, you must be seeing things. Maybe it's just a plane or a satellite, and you're making a big deal out of it." I tried to explain that the movement wasn't normal, that it repeated, but he just laughed and said, "All right, man, next time film it and show us." The idea of filming it had occurred to me, of course. I tried recording with my phone camera through the telescope eyepiece, but the image came out extremely shaky and unclear, and the point of light was so small it barely showed up as a pixel or two moving erratically in the video. There was no solid physical proof I could present. I went back to the notebook and pen. Every night, I added a new piece to the drawing, like assembling a large, complex puzzle. I started noticing that these shapes weren't just random lines. There was repetition, a certain symmetry, like a strange visual language. I would stare at these drawings for hours, trying to understand them. Was it a map, chemical symbols, the design for some machine? Time passed and I still didn't understand anything. The feeling of helplessness grew. I was witnessing something happening right before my eyes every night. Something that could potentially be the most important discovery in human history, and I couldn't comprehend it or report it to anyone convincingly. The fear began to evolve. It wasn't just fear of the unknown anymore. It became fear of what this message might actually be saying. If it was a message, who was sending it with such power that it barely appeared as a moving star? And what level of importance or danger would warrant such an effort? I started searching online for anything similar. Amateur astronomy forums, conspiracy theory websites, anything. I found no description matching what I was seeing. Everything was either mundane sightings of satellites or planes, or clearly fabricated videos. What I was seeing was different. It was real, persistent, and terrifyingly organized. Over time, the drawing in my notebook started to take shape. I now had a complete sequence of the movements, the points made over about an hour and a half each night. An incredibly complex drawing, filled with minute details. I'd looked at it, feeling like the key was right in front of me, but I couldn't find the door. One night, I was looking at the drawing, comparing it to the previous nights to ensure accuracy. I noticed something. In a specific part of the drawing, there seemed to be a certain ratio that repeated between the lengths of particular lines and specific angles. A mathematical ratio. Something like the golden ratio, perhaps, but much more complex. I thought to myself, wait a minute, what if these aren't visual symbols in the traditional sense? What if they're equations? What if it's the language of mathematics? They call mathematics the language of the universe. Maybe whoever is sending this message knows that the only way to communicate with any other civilization, regardless of their language or form, is through mathematical constants and logics. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. If this was math, then I needed someone who understood highly complex mathematics to decipher it. My education is average. My highest level of math was in high school, but this idea opened a new door. I began focusing on the drawing from a mathematical perspective, looking for numerical patterns, for known constants like pi or Euler's number. It was like trying to crack an impossible code. I spent days and nights trying to apply the simple math I knew, searching online for advanced mathematical concepts that might relate to these shapes. Chaos theory, fractal geometry, things I'd never heard of before. I felt like a blind person feeling their way through a dark maze. Every time I felt I was getting close to something, I'd hit a dead end. But I didn't give up. The feeling that the answer was near, that this message had meaning, was stronger than any frustration. To avoid suspicion or questions about the source of these shapes, I started using a tactic. I joined specialized math forums online, presenting small fragments of the drawing as abstract mathematical problems, or geometric puzzles. I was trying to solve as a hobby. I framed them in a context completely removed from astronomy or anything unusual. The reactions were mixed. Many people said they were just meaningless scribbles with no clear mathematical significance. Others tried to find patterns but arrived at illogical conclusions. However, a small minority, likely academics or people deeply versed in pure mathematics, were intrigued by the complexity and symmetry in these shapes. They began discussing a hypothesis, talking about the possibility that they represented a specific type of complex mathematical function, or an unconventional mathematical system. I followed these discussions eagerly, gathering any information, any thread that might lead me somewhere. I started understanding new terminology, learning about branches of mathematics I didn't know existed, and I began applying these ideas to the complete drawing I possessed. Slowly, gradually, the picture began to clear. It wasn't just a single equation. It was a series of interconnected mathematical equations and concepts, layered on top of each other. Each part of the drawing represented a variable, a constant, or a specific calculation. It was a purely mathematical language, completely abstract, devoid of any form of spoken or written language we knew. I spent several more weeks on the painstaking work, connecting the parts, trying to find the logic governing the sequence. It felt like solving the hardest equation of my life. And the closer I got to the solution, the more the fear inside me grew, because I started sensing the nature of the message. It wasn't a message of welcome, nor a map to a cosmic treasure, nor the design of a devastating weapon. It carried a sense of urgency and of pain. until I reached the crucial moment after long nights of sleeplessness, concentration, and calculations, aided by online tools and the discussions on the specialized forums I interacted with very cautiously. I managed to piece it all together. I was able to translate this mathematical message into a concept that we humans could grasp. The result was simpler and more horrifying than anything I could have possibly imagined. The message wasn't coming from a spacecraft orbiting this star, nor from a civilization living on a planet orbiting it. The message was coming from the star itself. I don't understand how, and I don't know if this is scientifically possible or not. Can stars possess consciousness? Can they be living beings in a way completely different from our understanding of life? I don't know, and that's not the important part right now. What matters is the contents of the message. All those complex geometric shapes and impossible movements, when translated from the abstract, universal language of mathematics, conveyed one simple, terrifying meaning, a meaning understandable to any living being anywhere in the universe, that might have reached a certain level of understanding of the fundamental laws of physics and mathematics. The equations described a specific physical state, a state of rapid, unexpected internal collapse, a state of imminent stellar death. And the final message? The culmination of all these movements was the mathematical equivalent of a simple phrase composed of two core concepts. Help request, imminent end/death, or simply in human terms, help us. We are dying. I sat there staring at the notebook, at the final equation frozen in place, unable to move, unable to think. The coldness I felt in that moment wasn't from the rooftop air. It came from the depths of the cosmos itself. A dying star, a conscious star, or at least one capable of communication somehow, sending a distress call across the vast expanse of space. A plea written in the language of mathematics so that anyone might understand it. And that someone was me. An ordinary young man sitting on a rooftop in a distant country, with a modest telescope. I was the one who cracked the code. I was the one who heard the scream. A scream that had been traveling for how many light years to reach here? Tens? Hundreds? Thousands? Millions? Where exactly is this star? Is it even still there? Or is this just an echo of a voice that died long, long ago? And what could I possibly do? Who am I to help a dying star? What help could I offer? Even if I knew its exact location? Even if I notified every space agency in the world? What would they do? Send a spaceship that would take millions of years to arrive? And if it arrived, what could it possibly do? The sense of absolute helplessness was crushing. The feeling of cosmic loneliness became deeper, more terrifying. We aren't just small in this universe. We are also frighteningly powerless. We hear the cries for help from our cosmic neighbors, and we can do absolutely nothing. That night, after deciphering the code, I went back to the rooftop. I pointed the telescope at the same spot. The point of light was still there, still tracing the same complex geometric shapes in the cold silence of space, still sending the same desperate message. Help us. We are dying. This time, I wasn't looking at it with curiosity or fear of the unknown. I was looking at it with profound sadness and a terrible sense of guilt. I knew. I understood. And I could do nothing. The sky where I used to find peace and escape had transformed for me into a vast graveyard filled with stars dying in silence, or screaming pleas for help that no one hears, or those who hear cannot answer. Every night now I go up to the rooftop, not to enjoy the stars, but because I honestly don't know why. Maybe to bear witness, Maybe so that this scream doesn't just echo into the void completely alone. I sit and watch this point as it draws its message of death, knowing that a real star, a massive entity perhaps the size of our sun or larger, is collapsing and crying for help somewhere far away in the darkness. The biggest problem is that a realization like this changes everything. How can I go back to living my ordinary life knowing what I know? How can I care about trivial problems of work, money, and relationships when I know that beings the size of stars are pleading for help in the universe around us? I still go up to the rooftop every night, and the point of light still traces the same pattern, the same equation, the same scream. Help us. We are dying. And I don't know what to do, and I don't know if there's anyone else, anywhere else in this universe, seeing the same message and feeling the same helplessness that I feel right now. Just the thought that this message might be traced across the skies of other planets, before the eyes of other beings, each one standing alone, as helpless as I am. That thought makes me want to scream. But I hold it in, and I just keep watching in silence. Maybe that's all I can do. I don't think I'm me. I know that sounds strange, and yeah, if I heard someone else say it, I'd probably tell them to see a psychiatrist. But it's true. I would never wear a striped sweater, and definitely not on a random day in July. I don't even own striped sweaters. Yet there I was in a photo inside a photo album my best friend's mom was showing me, grinning in a red and blue striped knit like it belonged on me. And that wasn't the only strange thing. Earlier this week I came home from a month-long work trip. I was exhausted, dragging my suitcase through the door when my girlfriend greeted me. "Hey baby, I made your favorite meal. Eat it before it gets cold. I'm gonna go run a bath for us." Amy called over her shoulder. "Chicken parmesan." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was tired, hungry, and honestly touched by the gesture. I sat down and inhaled the food without hesitation. It was good. Really good. Too good. Halfway through rinsing my plate, it hit me. I don't even like chicken. I never have. I haven't eaten it since I was a kid. The texture makes my skin crawl. So why the hell did I eat an entire plate of it without even noticing? I shook it off. Jet lag, maybe. Or maybe I was just being dramatic. I got in the shower with Amy, didn't say anything, and we went to bed. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when Amy tossed me my keys and kissed me goodbye. I caught them midair and headed downstairs. Halfway, I felt them in my hand. Something was off. The grooves, the weight, they weren't mine. I looked down. Honda keys. I rushed back up the stairs. "Whose keys are these?" I asked, trying not to sound as shaken as I felt. Amy looked up from her coffee, brow furrowing. "What?" "These keys, Amy. They're not mine. I drive a Toyota. So, whose are these?" "Don't play dumb." She blinked. "Honey, are you feeling okay? Those are your keys, stupid," she said with a soft laugh. "No, they're not." My voice dropped cold. Without saying a word, Amy disappeared into the hallway, then returned holding a framed picture. "That's you," she said, handing it to me. In the photo, I was standing next to a shiny new Honda Civic at a dealership. Huge smile. Handshake with the salesman, wearing, of course, a striped sweater. "That was 6 months ago, babe. When I surprised you with the car. Do you seriously not remember?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. That was me. My face, my grin, my stance. But it felt like I was looking at a stranger with my skin. I hurried into the bedroom, pulled open the closet, and froze. Dozens of sweaters, striped, patterned, holiday themed. My entire wardrobe looked like an ugly sweater convention. Amy followed me in, concern all over her face. Jamie, are you okay? You're starting to worry me. I'm fine, I lied. Just didn't sleep well, I said, even though I slept like a baby. I kissed her on the cheek and left for work. Outside, the Civic sat gleaming in the driveway. It looked familiar now. I got in. It smelled like me. Air fresheners, black tree scent, LED lights under the dash. Everything clean and organized. Exactly as I would have it. But it still felt wrong. Like I was stepping into someone else's life who just happened to be me. I arrived at the office late, feeling hazy. As I settled into my usual desk, a voice interrupted me. Jamie, you're at my desk, said Andrew, my annoying coworker. I looked up. What? No, I've always sat here. Just because I've been gone for a while doesn't mean you can steal my desk, Mountain Drew. Mountain Drew? Seriously? He muttered, pushing up his glasses. We had a bit of back and forth, and 10 minutes later I was in HR. Do you know what your position is here? The woman behind the desk asked. Of course, I said. I'm in charge of the Orbis project. And what does that entail? She asked, typing something. I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I attend meetings, organize. Wait, I blinked. What is the relevance of this question? I deflected. Well, she said, swiveling her monitor slightly. You're in the wrong department. Wrong floor, actually. And according to your file, you haven't been assigned to the Orbis project. That doesn't launch for another 2 months. You were moved to data processing last month after your last incident. My stomach dropped. What incident? She scrolled through my record with a practiced sigh. The one where you were caught dumping unmarked liquid into coworkers. Lunches in the break room. Honestly, you're lucky you weren't fired. I sat frozen in the chair, every nerve in my body screaming. What the hell is happening to me? The words slipped out before I could stop myself. Excuse me? She asked. My face turned slightly red. I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time readjusting after the work trip. Okay, Mr. Jamie, why don't you just go on ahead back to your proper work area and try to stay out of trouble, please. The paperwork isn't easy on these old fingers, you know. Yes, of course. Thank you, I said as I quickly and quietly whisked away back into the building. After asking around a bit, I finally made it to my actual desk. Everyone on that floor acted as if I belonged there. I got a quick rundown of my tasks and got right into it. Trying not to think about all the bizarre things that happened, I decided to put it out of my mind and focus solely on work. About 30 minutes before I had to clock out, I decided to go through my emails. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I checked my drafts and saw my last draft dated on the day I went on to the work trip. Subject, Orbis. Sweet red, it's not me. Take the call. It made no sense, but I didn't know what to make of it, so I just went back to work. Besides that first day back, everything else seemed to be running smoothly. I got through the week without any more hiccups. I didn't mention my apprehension to Amy because she is such a worrywart. That was until today. I had planned to visit my best friend's family for a weekend barbecue. Kind of an unofficial celebration for his niece's upcoming graduation. I got there relatively early. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. I needed something familiar, but if I thought that today would bring me peace, I was wrong. The grill was already going when I got there. The scent of charcoal and barbecue sauce hit me before I even stepped out of the car. Kids were running around the yard with water guns, and someone had queued up an early 2000s playlist on a Bluetooth speaker. It felt right. I needed this. familiar faces. I spotted Marcus, my best friend since middle school, near the back porch, beer in hand, laughing with his cousin. He lit up when he saw me. "Jamie, look who finally decided to show up," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Hey man, sorry I'm early. Didn't want to miss the ribs this time." "Smart move," he chuckled. "You're not still vegetarian, are you?" That made me pause. "I was never vegetarian," I said, half laughing. He blinked, then shrugged. "Oh, right, yeah." The moment passed, but something about it lingered. I grabbed a plate, made small talk, accepted a drink. For the first time all week, I felt like myself again, until I wandered inside to use the bathroom. On the hallway wall, right before the guest bathroom, was a photo collage I'd seen a dozen times before. I'd even helped Marcus's mom hang it last year, but this time something was off. At the center of the collage, surrounded by prom photos and school portraits, was a framed picture of me and Marcus at the lake house. I remember that trip, or at least I thought I did, but in the photo I was wearing a striped sweater again, the same red and blue one from the dealership photo. I stared at it for a long time. My arm was around Marcus's shoulder. We were grinning, beers in hand, but there was something wrong with my face. Too wide a smile. Almost posed. Unnatural. Why would I even wear a sweater in the sweaty July weather at a lake anyway? "You okay?" a voice said behind me. I jumped. It was Marcus's mom holding a bowl of potato salad. She smiled warmly. "Bathroom's just there, hun." I nodded. "Yeah, thanks. I don't remember this picture being here." She looked at it. "Oh, you two had so much fun that weekend. You don't remember? We printed that out the same night you all came back. You helped me pick the frame, Jamie." "Oh, yeah. I must still be tired," I said quickly, slipping past her into the bathroom and locking the door behind me. I turned on the sink and stared at myself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was looking at someone else. I washed my face. Suddenly my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The area code was wrong. Too many digits. I answered without thinking. "Jamie?" A panicked voice cut through the speaker, echoing in the small bathroom. "Who is this?" I snapped. "It's me. You. I'm you." What? Is this some kind of joke? "Marcus, if this is you..." "No, please just listen to me. Don't hang up. This is important." "I need your help. I need to get back to my home." "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked. "The Orbis project. It worked. We opened a gateway, a dimensional gate, but something went wrong. We didn't know it would swap us. I don't belong here, and you don't belong there." No, this isn't real. You're lying." "I swear to you, we don't have much time. The longer we stay out of sync, the harder it'll be to return. We'll be lost, Jamie." My head was spinning. How is this even possible? What went wrong? I don't know exactly. There were variables we didn't account for, but I've been working on a fix. I think there's a way back. How do I know you're telling the truth? Have you noticed anything strange? People acting like you said or did things you don't remember? Preferences that don't feel like yours? I hesitated. "Yeah, I don't like chicken." "I do." I swallowed. "This is your world? You're the one who drives the Honda Civic?" "Yeah, Amy bought it for me." "And the sweaters? What's with all the striped sweaters?" "Sweaters?" "Your closet's full of them, and you're wearing one in every photo, even at the lake trip last year." He paused, then said, "Who the hell wears a sweater in July?" My mother used to tell me I was her little miracle, not because I survived anything, just the opposite. Because something never showed up when I did. I was born on July 26th, 1999. Night birth, full moon. The room was dim, but my dad had a camera, an old school camcorder. They still have the footage, and you can clearly see it. Everyone else in the room casts a shadow. I don't. It's not subtle. It's not a trick of the light. My tiny body rests on the bed, but the floor beneath me is untouched. I move, nothing follows. I reach for the nurse's finger. Her shadow stretches long across the tiles. Mine stays gone. My parents tried to explain it. Doctors said it was a fluke. Physics, lighting. But it wasn't, because it never changed. All through childhood, no shadow on sunny days. Not in streetlights, not in flash photos. And then around age 13 it started to change. Not that I had a shadow, but I'd see others, shadows, where they didn't belong. One time I was sitting on the toilet, door shut, lights on. I looked down and a shadow moved across the floor, like someone walking past. But no one was there. Another time I was playing in the backyard. The sun was high, I still cast nothing, but I looked to my right, and there was a shadow of me, standing just a few feet away, not moving, not mine. When I told my mom, she went pale. She never told me what she saw in the hospital that night, but she sat me down and said something I've never forgotten. If it's yours, it'll come back eventually, and when it does, don't let it touch you. I thought she was being dramatic, but then last week at 25 years old, it returned. I was brushing my teeth when I saw it, the shadow behind me, attached to me. I laughed at first. It had been so long, I figured it finally caught up. But then I turned off the bathroom light and it didn't go away. It stayed there, in the dark. It shouldn't have been visible, but it was. And it moved when I didn't. I stepped left. It stayed put. I held my breath and it breathed. Chest rising, falling. Even though it was flat on the floor, it moved like it had lungs. I turned the light back on. Gone. But I could feel it now, following me, watching. At night it stands at the foot of my bed. I don't sleep anymore. Last night I blinked, and it was on the ceiling. Directly above me, stretched long and thin like oil. It whispered, "You were never whole. I've come to fix that." I tried to run. The lights in the hallway all blew out. I got to the front door and my reflection didn't move. I watched myself, frozen in glass, mouth hanging open, eyes wide. Then the reflection smiled, and its shadow twisted like smoke. I've locked myself in the bathroom now. The lights are still on, but the shadow is inside the mirror. It's waiting. It said my name and then, "You don't have a shadow because I took it with me when I left. You were always mine, and now I want it back."